Now let's go to my guest, Michael Henry. Again, call it apropos, if you will. Republican Attorney General candidate in New York. New York City, the council has approved, the incoming mayor approves and endorses Eric Adams, the incoming mayor, the idea that non citizens should vote in local elections in New York City. Now, Michael, if elected Attorney General of the state of New York and the responsibility of an Attorney
Mhm.
General, would it be on you to challenge the city of New York on behalf of the citizens of New York State?
Yeah, I believe it is. First off, thank you for having me, David. But yes, I believe it's unconstitutional, and I'm not going to wait to become the Attorney General of the state of New York. The moment Mayor de Blasio's ink dries on this, since he's now signaled that he's changed his position from prior saying that it was unconstitutional to now saying he's going to sign it, I will file a lawsuit in my personal capacity to stop this, because what this will do was it will embolden them to do this on the state level. And if they do that, we will not win elections in this state. And New York is actually a more conservative state. We recently, when it comes to voting, we recently just voted down same-day voter registration and no excuse absentee balloting. And the people do not want this, in my opinion. And I believe this was a response to some of the shifts they've seen in the 2021 elections with certain minority groups such as Asians, Latinos, and Russian and Ukrainians starting to come to the Republican Party in large numbers. So I will absolutely file a lawsuit the moment Mayor de Blasio, his ink dries on this bill.
To play devil's advocate, something
Mhm.
that you do often as you learn and practice your profession. You try to argue against yourself. I certainly do as a talk show host. How could anyone make the case for non-citizens casting a vote? Now, I hear the easy response, which is they live in the city, but the fact is, if you're a non-citizen, whether you're lawfully present or illegal, it's
Mhm.
simply not in U.S. code. So how do they make the argument beyond the emotional?
Well, there's two things. First, illegal aliens aren't covered under this bill, but that'll be the next step. Their argument is taxation without representation, but there's a couple things to that. Number one, these people do receive benefits for the taxes that they pay. Secondly, you have people that work in the city from New Jersey and Connecticut that are paying taxes because they work in the city. It's clear that the New York State Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, defines the qualification of a voter, and it specifically uses the word citizen. And our election law similarly says that you have to be a U.S. citizen. Now, is it a plain textual reading where someone can make the argument that this could apply at a local level? It's possible. But New York in 1804 started to take steps against non-citizen voting. It was actually one of the first states. And for the last 200 years, it's always been against non-citizen voting. And I say it's a violation of the state constitution, not federal law in this matter, but state constitution, because the federal law only bans non-citizens from voting in federal elections. Here, it's clear that even Mayor de Blasio's office initially conceded that it violates the state constitution to allow non-citizens to vote in New York City elections.
Yeah, if you're to believe de Blasio on just about anything, I
Right,
guess I
right.
could see that. But, the reason I asked the question that way, and for point of clarification, important for people out there, 808,000 lawfully present but not illegal yet. But you see, this is the catch here. Smart strategy on their part. When you have such low voter turnout in the city of New York across the five boroughs, the example of the most recent mayoral election, and you move the voter rolls enough of a small percentage, you solidify your victories even more. Republicans are already outnumbered in the city of New York in voter registration. New York City only elects non-Democrats in the sense of Rudy Giuliani, Michael Bloomberg on a citywide scale, and occasionally in the boroughs you get something. But the Democrats are smart because they're thinking ahead. You start with lawfully present non-citizens. You have illegal aliens who will have children or have already had children who are reaching the age of majority. When I look at the New York City breakdown by the Census Bureau, and you even go down to certain areas, you start to see where their strategy works. They shift the
Yep.
city, which can then be the heavyweight shift for the state of New York. So this is a defined long-term strategy, isn't it?
I totally believe that. And I think one of the things you pointed out was Mayor Giuliani. Mayor Giuliani spent over $1 million on election integrity when he ran. And I think the problem with Republicans is we often tend to fight with each other before we fight with Democrats, and we don't see the long-term plans in place that the Democrats have. And what happens is after the Democrats succeed in getting what they want, we become reactive instead of proactively trying to fight what they're doing. This is clear what they're doing. You stated it perfectly. They're literally trying to change the voting base of New York City and then eventually New York State. 800,000 people. You don't have that many voters in some states. And to allow people to do this, it could carry every city election. Then they'll be emboldened to do it at the state level. And then you'll see other states start to do it and follow it. And the problem for Republicans is we can't sit here and wait and say, oh, well, if we win the next election. No, we have to say it's unconstitutional now, and we have to fight it now. And Republicans need to understand that the argument you made is exactly what they are trying to do. It's a long-term strategy. They've been talking about this for nearly 20 years, and they're finally emboldened enough to just go ahead and try to do it. And Mayor de Blasio has just signed on. Eric Adams has taken the position that he will sign it. So the only thing we could do is try to fight the constitutionality of this and stop it before it starts